are the new slave chains, right? So, you have to sign this contract and sign this document and sign this document. It's like you're binded to this. And then if you break that, that's your livelihood, that's your life. So we the new slaves. Athletes are literally the new slaves because we need this. Our families, our friends depend on this contract to eat.
Well, here we go again. Another group of illogical people decide to join the sports world not knowing anything about sports while claiming to know the facts when all they actually state is opinions. Now, this next acknowledgement in the worst people in sports should honestly go to the biggest sports media channel in America, ESPN. Why? Because they hired this so-called doctor to continue to push their one-sided liberal leftist agenda. This guy was hired to spread a bunch of lies by sharing why he believes sports are racist. How are sports racist, you might be asking? Well, they're not. But don't worry, I'll be discussing why the higher-ups at ESPN have lost their minds by hiring the social justice warrior. I'm sure a lot of you have no idea who this person is, but today I'm talking about Ibrim X Kendi. Before we discuss this piece of work, let's talk about ESPN and why they have lost their minds. If you haven't noticed, ever since 2020, ESPN has gone way downhill with their sports talk shows. They all have the same opinions. However, when someone has an opposing opinion, they are suspended, fired, or threatened and guilted into believing what the Disney Corporation wants them to believe, which is, once again, a one-sided liberal leftist agenda. Just in case you didn't know, Disney owns ESPN, as well as many other big-time TV stations like ABC, FX, Freeform, and National Geographic. Not to mention they own Marvel and Star Wars now, which they ruined. But that's a rant for another time. Anyway, getting back to the point. A perfect example of ESPN attempting to indoctrinate their employees is star anchor Sage Steele, who after working at ESPN for 16 years was sidelined after she made remarks about ESPN's handling of COVID mandates and about President Barack Obama's ethnic identity while on the Jay Cutler podcast.
Do a couple fill-ins on The View. Mm-hmm. And I guess this was even before. This is when Obama was still president. And Barbara Walters, ripped me live TV and then afterwards too, because they were wondering, they're like, why is it so important to you to say that you're biracial? I'm like, because my mom's white, she's Irish Italian, and my dad's black. And I'm like, why not? And she's like, well, what happens when you fill out your census? I'm like, well, I don't know when the last time I filled out my census was, but if they make you choose a race, she's like, what are you going to put? I go, well, both. She's like, well, you can't. She goes, well, what if Barack Obama chose black and he's biracial? I'm like, well, congratulations to the president. That's his thing. I go, I think that's fascinating considering his black dad was nowhere to be found, but his white mom and grandma raised him. I didn't want to do it, but I work for a company that mandates it, and I had until September 30th to get it done or I'm out. I think I respect everyone's decision. I really do. But to mandate it is sick. Mm-hmm. And it's scary to me in many ways.
ESPN tried to silence Sage Steele because she had different opinions than the Disney Corporation. Other sports anchors on ESPN, who were for the left side of politics, were able to state whatever opinions they wanted on their shows, while Sage Steele couldn't open her mouth to state her opinions. Sage said, I wasn't the only one who felt silence, who felt scared. I mean, some of us would literally whisper in the corner or even in the bathroom and talk about, hey, we can't say this too loud. Sage also came out and said that opinions on one side, the left, were able to be discussed, but not the other, the right.
publicly apologize, issue a statement. Then I didn't know they were going to crush me with another statement, and then take assignments away from me. That's when I thought, wait a minute. It's one thing to be punished. It's another thing to continue. Most importantly, while my peers are doing what? Going on ESPN platforms, talking about how devastated they were that Roe versus Wade got overturned on an NBA show. Having a moment of silence on women's college hoops during the NCAA tournament to mourn what was happening in Florida, the Don't Say Gay bill, where those words aren't even in the bill. So if we're allowing that and encouraging that by producers and management to have them talk about those issues on sports programming live, but I can't talk about my own opinions on a podcast that has nothing to do with ESPN.
So Sage sued ESPN for breaching her contract and violating her First Amendment right. Disney offered Sage $500,000 to settle the dispute. Then Sage posted on X, "I've decided to leave ESPN so I can exercise my First Amendment rights more freely." Hell yeah, Sage Steele. Don't bow down to the mouse. Considering this is supposed to be a sports media channel, why the hell would they be getting into politics? Well, like I already mentioned, ESPN is owned by one of the biggest and wokest corporations in America today, Disney. Disney, if you haven't noticed, has turned to one-sided liberal views and won't allow the opposing view, the conservative one, to be a part of their company. So ESPN continues to push crazy liberal talking points like everything is racist, including sports, or men can play with women inside of sports, there's no difference, and abortion is healthcare. Do we remember when Roe v. Wade was overturned? ESPN, a sports channel, couldn't stop talking about it.
Yesterday, the sports world celebrated the 50th anniversary of Title IX, which bans discrimination based on gender in education, including sports. But today, the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, declaring that the constitutional right to abortion, upheld for nearly a half century, no longer exists. In less than 24 hours, we celebrated equal rights for women, and now we react to women's reproductive rights being taken away.
Now, what the hell does abortion have to do with sports? Why the hell would you talk about racism and abortion on a sports program? I know why. To answer this question, I have a quick question for all of you out there watching. Who are the majority of people that watch Disney or ESPN? It's obvious, right? It's children. And adults who smoke weed like a chimney, drink alcohol like a sailor, and sleep until noon because they're too hungover from the night before. Oh, wait. Those are child adults. Oh, right. At least children are justified, which is their innocence. When you're an adult, you have no excuse. You're just lazy. Mere sloth. Now, maybe I'm outside of my wits here, but aren't kids the easiest minds to mold, to indoctrinate? Children are learning creatures, right? So if these children keep watching sports shows that bring up leftist talking points, maybe they start believing in them. All their favorite sports stars keep bringing up leftist politics like LeBron James and Stephen Curry. Why wouldn't they want to believe what their heroes are saying? Which is actually what they're told to say. Have you noticed Hollywood is also doing this with everyone's favorite actors? But this is a sports show, so I'll keep it to that. Which finally brings us back to this idiotic professor from the University of Boston, Ibrim X Kendi. And what does Professor Ibrim X Kendi teach? Well, he teaches African American history, history of racism and anti-racism, and American intellectual history. He's also the director of the Center for Anti-Racist Research. Wow, quite the advocate for racism, huh? Considering he's the professor of racism, he should know everything about racism, right? Well, let's hear his definition of racism, shall we?
Sure. So racism, I would define it as a collection of racist policies that lead to racial inequity that are substantiated by racist ideas. Sure. A collection of racist policies that lead to racial inequity that are substantiated by racist ideas. And anti-racism is pretty simple, using the same terms. Anti-racism is a collection of anti-racist policies leading to racial, anybody want to take a guess? Equity that are substantiated by anti-racist ideas.
What? Do we all know what a circular definition is? What Ibrim X Kendi just said is nonsense. It's like if I were to say the definition of a sport is when someone actively plays a sport or something that is sports-like. This guy is an idiot. And of course he's glorified all throughout the media. A New York Times bestseller. A doctor, huh? Doctor of what? The history of racism? The guy can't even give us a definition of racism without using the term inside of the definition. So now you're asking me, what does Ibrim X Kendi have to do with sports, Max? Let me answer that for you in 2 words. He doesn't. Absolutely nothing. He has nothing to do with sports because he knows nothing about sports. And yet, ESPN hired this guy to star in their new docu-series called Skin in the Game. Well, that doesn't sound racist. In this 5-part series, Ibrim X Kendi had a lot to say on how sports are racist.
Contracts, are the new slave chains, right? So, you have to sign this contract and sign this document and sign this document. It's like you're binded to this. And then if you break that, that's your livelihood, that's your life. So we the new slaves. Athletes are literally the new slaves because we need this. Our families, our friends depend on this contract to eat.
Oh, very interesting thought, Ibrim X Kendi. But you know what? Let's hear it from a pro athlete. Let's ask MVP quarterback Patrick Mahomes how he feels about this. Patty, you just signed a $450 million contract extension, which puts you over $500 million in 10 years. If you do the math, that's $50 million per year, and that's not putting into effect your endorsements from Adidas and State Farm, Subway, Hy-Vee, Oakley, Head and Shoulders, and DirecTV. I mean, wait, I lost my thought. What was the question I was supposed to ask? Just so we are clear, athletes are not slaves. Contracts are not slave chains. When a player makes millions of dollars to play a sport for a living, that is not modern day slavery. That's a privilege. Athletes get to live the high life and basically do whatever they want because they have so much money and fame. They live in massive mansions, drive fancy sports cars, eat at high-end restaurants, and even date supermodels, if they want to. How is that slavery, Ibrim X Kendi? How does this make them chained down, you envious jackass? Can we believe ESPN hired this guy? Well, I can. Because he fits their narrative. Everything, including sports, is racist. And if you don't think it's racist, then you're a racist. You're not racist if you don't agree with ESPN or Ibrim X Kendi. That would mean you have common sense and understand that narratives ESPN is trying to push do not match reality, and in broad terms, are straight up bullshit. Sports used to give us a sense of community. It was 2 hours out of our day where we could watch our favorite teams and stay away from the bullshit that's happening in the world. It was a time where we could get together as a family, friends, acquaintances, and even strangers to focus on something that breaks us away from our stressful lives. That's what entertainment in general was supposed to help us with, but now all they want to do is tell you how to think. Do we really think sports are racist? If you honestly do, I suggest you turn off your TV, your phone, and go for a walk outside. Get some fresh air and do something for yourself that isn't what the TV is telling you to do. I bet you'll be less bitter and your tight butthole will loosen up. Ibrim X Kendi, on the other hand, will always be bitter, and his butthole will always be tight. His purpose in this world is to divide us and continue to spread racism. To quote the great words of Morgan Freeman when he was asked, "What do you recommend we do to stop racism?"
Black History Month you find
ridiculous.
Why?
You're going to relegate my history to a month?
Oh, come on.
What do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month? No, come on, tell me.
Well, I'm Jewish.
Okay, which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh, why not?
Yeah.
Do you want one?
No.
I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
How are we going to get rid of racism?
Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man. I know you as Mike Wallace. You know me as Morgan Freeman.
Stop talking about it. Ibrim X Kendi can't have that. He will never stop talking about racism. And do you know why? Because then he would lose his power, his control. His whole life is dedicated to spreading racism. If we all stopped talking about it, what would he have to talk about in his books or in his classes? Now, I know I'm bashing on this guy, which is well-deserved because someone needs to stand up against the lies and the constant bullshit that keeps spreading like a virus. But I'm not giving the worst people in sports to him today. Instead, I'm giving it to the people that gave him a platform in their organization in the first place. The Disney Corporation. Disney, you have shown the world that you do not care about people's happiness and joy anymore. You do not care about the well-being of kids and families like Disney's founder, Walt Disney, used to care about when he was still living. All you care about is money, power, and control. Your focus on liberal leftist policies has pushed so many people away, not only from ESPN, but from your evil corporation in general. In fact, the Disney Plus streaming service has lost over 11.7 million subscribers and has lost more than $10 billion in the last couple years, and those numbers continue to grow. According to DisneyFanatic.com, reports show that the Walt Disney Company lost $123 billion in market value in this past year. According to other sources, that number is actually at $195 billion. To try and make up the money they lost, they fired 7,000 employees. They even fired 20 big-time sports commentators from ESPN. Some we might know, like Max Kellerman, Jalen Rose, LaFonso Ellis, Jeff Van Gundy, Keyshawn Johnson, and Susie Colbert. Yep, ESPN has lost it because Disney and its executives have lost it. They continue to believe that if they keep pushing leftist ideologies, viewers will sooner or later just buy into it and join the cause. What Disney executives don't understand anymore is that families have values, morals, and have God in their lives. People who have God in their life don't believe a mouse is their God. Let's all do the world a favor and let Disney know we don't want their bullshit. Maybe if they lose a couple more $1 billion, they'll wake up and stop focusing on racism and start getting back to family entertainment. Back to the sports we always knew on ESPN. But since Disney wants to focus more on politics and less on family-oriented fun, that is why here we consider the Disney Corporation to be one of the worst people in sports.
Sure. A collection of racist policies that lead to racial inequity that are substantiated by racist ideas.
What?